Hello, everyone. I'd just like to give a very warm welcome to you all to this seminar for the Anna Freud Centre's Early Years in Mind Learning Network. We're delighted you're here. We've got some really interesting speakers, really key subject about staff well-being. And I hope there's a lot here that you'll be able to share and you'll be able to share with us. And just to say before we start, Camilla Rosen is our head of early years. And she isn't able to be here today as she's unwell. So I'm taking her place. My name is Tim Linehan. I was the lead on the early years staff wellbeing resource, and I worked on staff wellbeing resources for schools as well, and also head of communications. So I'll be chairing today, and I'll start by giving a brief introduction of the Anna Freud Centre's and our work in early years. One thing just before I start, if you are tweeting, you're welcome to tweet. We really like you and encourage you to do so. Could you use the hashtag early years in mind? So what is early years in mind? Well, in the last 18 months, we've grown from 0 to 15,000, over 15,000 members. And it's a learning network. It's where we share resources. Almost all of them are free. And we're particularly interested in promoting attachment in early years setting. Our content is always aims to be free and accessible. And we do a whole range of different pieces of work, from common difficulties in the early years with information on aggression, anxiety, bereavement. There's an A to Z here. Do check it out. It's all free. And also we're also very interested in hearing your responses to it. So the other pieces of work we've got, working with families facing challenges. So there's some work here on supporting dads, supporting families affected by homelessness, supporting young parents and carers. And we're building this up. We've built this work up over the last 18 months, and it's expanding all the time. So it's always worth keeping an eye open for. We've got a range of different resources, 8 ways parents and carers can help manage a transition back to nursery, stuff on self-care, supporting a baby's relationship with others. And there's a whole, as I say, a growing list of resources for you to use. So the best way I can only encourage you to sign up to Early Years in Mind if you haven't done already. We send information out once a term, sometimes long term, and this will update you with any of our new materials we've got. And also we sometimes run things like surveys, and we're always interested in collecting your views. One of our recent publications is What is Attachment? Again, it's a key part of our work, and you'll find them very useful. Small materials here around supporting young children families through bereavement. And we're also very keen to hear from you. A lot of this work is based on views that we've collected from people working in the sector. Your views really shape the work that we do. We want to respond to your needs, and we want to be able to make sure that you're supported in your work. So today, just to give a brief introduction, we're going to kick off with Stella Zhukowski from the National Day Centers Nursery Association, talking generally, but from a very much of policy practice, supporting staff wellbeing in education. Then I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Rachel Lyons about the resource that we've created, which has been downloaded around 5,000 times so far. Then Asiya Patel is going to be talking about the practitioner's perspective. So, but just to start with, there will be a Q&A session at the end, and at the bottom of your screen you can see the Q&A symbol, and if your questions will be collated, and at the end we'll have 20 minutes to go through those questions, and I hope that we'll be able to point you in the right direction wherever we can. Just to say, why start early years, why staff wellbeing? Well, there's an increasing recognition of the value and importance of early years staff and early intervention. Yet, as you all know, very often early years staff are unappreciated, not by the parents, not by the people who know the services, but perhaps by others. And was really noticeable that throughout COVID, it was always seen that the early years staff were forgotten when it came to PPE and other protection. And they felt that somehow that the value, the immense value of the work is sometimes under-recognized. In addition, another thing that's under-recognized is the issues that you deal with, and also working with families who experience hardship, whether that's trauma, children under social services, or bereavement. And yet, despite all these hardships, there's lots of evidence to say that you really love your job and you really love the work that you do. And so well-being is really important because, you know, it takes a lot to get through the sort of hardships that sometimes you face, the stresses sometimes you face, and it's time that we felt we wanted to recognise that and focus on staff. Without recognising the needs of staff, then it's very difficult to support the children that you work with. So it's all about making an invisible issue visible. We need to be public about managing and the need and our needs. Otherwise, we can't function the way that we want to and need to. And today we're going to look at that. A lot of this is quite simple. A lot of it's really interesting. There's been some fantastic cases of really good practice, and I hope you'll find them of interest. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And to start with, I'm going to introduce you to Stella Zhikowski. I'm really delighted. I'm so pleased to introduce Stella. She heads up the Workforce Development and Training Division at the National Day Nurseries Association, and works to ensure that all accredited and non-accredited training meets the needs of members. Stella has been instrumental in the growth of the NDNA's quality assurance programs, which was relaunched as eQuality Counts in 2008. Her responsibilities also include Millie's Mark, publications, contract management of funded projects in England. Stella represents the views of members on workforce issues and has a strong history in supporting adults to achieve learning and development goals. I know Stella from her work on the staff wellbeing resource, and her knowledge, her expertise and insight on early years throughout the development of the project was given generously and received with gratitude. So we're really lucky, really pleased to have her with us today. And Stella, over to you.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be asked to speak here today. Thank you so much for your introduction there, Tim. Yesterday, I gave a presentation about the workforce from a 4-part year-long study that we carried out with Education Policy Institute during the pandemic. The study was to understand the impact of the pandemic was having on staffing decisions, which settings had to make through the pandemic. And within the presentation, I covered the reasons why practitioners had left early years sector voluntarily during this period. I wanted to start the presentation by telling you what we found out about why staff left. Can I have the next slide, please? So the pandemic's brought significant disruption to children's education, as you've just heard from Tim, and that's going to have a long-lasting effect on society and the economy. But whilst the importance of high-quality early education on children's future attainment is really well evidenced, the early years workforce hasn't received nearly as much attention as the rest of the education system during the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, the sector struggled with recruitment and retention, and these challenges have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Mixed levels of government support and the accompanying sense of lack of recognition for the hard work during the pandemic have left the sector feeling more strained. The high turnover rates that plague the sector and the slow recovery from the pandemic mean that providers are still struggling to recruit. So during this survey, in total over the study, over the 12 months, providers told us that approximately 1,600 staff left the sector. And the highest number of leavers as a percentage of respondents during March to July of 2020, which was the start of lockdown and when furlough began. And the main reason given for leaving was that staff were finding alternative employment due to job security and the uncertainty of furlough. insufficient pay to make ends meet, and the fact that actually they could earn higher wages in other jobs like supermarkets, social care, and because of personal concerns as well related to the virus. Although we didn't specifically ask the question related to mental health within this survey or well-being, these responses really demonstrate the stress and pressure that the early years workforce have experienced, impacting greatly on their well-being. I'll put a link into the reports into the chat if you're interested in reading more about the study. Can I have the next slide, please? So working with our youngest children can be immensely rewarding, but we know it can also be physically and emotionally demanding role. Having faced a tough time over the past 18 months, we at NDNA have heard time and time again how fears around the COVID pressures of working through the pandemic, balanced with the fears of nurseries closing, have all taken its toll on the workforce. We also understand and acknowledge the daily pressures on early years employers, which are intensified by external factors such as chronic government underfunding of the sector. I'd like to take an opportunity now really to thank the workforce personally at this point for their commitment and dedication to our youngest children throughout the pandemic and beyond. We know above everything else that nursery practitioners are the lifeblood of early years settings, and they make the difference to the quality of children's early learning experiences. Staff are nursery's biggest asset. A qualified early years workforce drives high quality provision. Therefore, it's crucially important that staff feel happy and supported in their workplace and able to carry out the role to the best of their ability. Can I have the next slide, please? We hear daily throughout contact with members how passionate early years staff are about working with our youngest children, and that's extremely heartwarming. We know that nurseries already do so much to recognise and celebrate the staff's hard work and dedication, and that's highly commended. It's important that moving forward as a sector, we build on and strengthen what's done to foster staff wellbeing in the workplace. Staff wellbeing needs to lie at the heart of the nursery setting, so we can best support those who are educating our future generations. Promoting staff wellbeing is vitally important. It can help to improve performance, increase productivity, promote staff engagement, and improve overall job satisfaction, which can lead to a content workforce and in turn reduce absences and staff turnover. Supporting staff wellbeing is not only direct impact on the person themselves as an individual, but it also has a positive impact on colleagues and children, creates positive working environments where individuals and organisations as a whole can thrive. Leaders and managers have got a pivotal role in supporting staff wellbeing, as well as being a positive role model. And Ofsted inspectors have focused to observe how well leaders and managers support staff at inspection. Outstanding and good managers and leaders will be able to demonstrate that they ensure highly effective and meaningful engagement takes place with staff at all levels, and that any issues are identified. When issues are identified, in particularly about workload, that they deal with them consistently and appropriately and quickly. That leaders engage with the staff and they're aware of these main pressures on them, and that they're realistic and constructive in the way that they manage staff, including the workloads. That leaders protect staff from harassment, bullying and discrimination, and that this will be shown by staff that can consistently report that high levels of support for wellbeing issues are in place. Can I have the next slide, please? I know that today you'll be hearing about the report that has been produced by Anna Freud, but I wanted to highlight another study that was carried out in 2017. So this study, The Thrive at Work, was an independent review of mental health by Lord Dennis Stevenson and Paul Farmer, and it was carried out in October 2017. It's a nice and easy read. There's a publication on the website. If anybody's interested, I can drop the link into the chat box later. But as you can see here, there's some eye-opening costs associated with poor mental health and well-being, and not just for the country and government. So people with poor mental health and well-being who are in work, if they're not supported, there's huge costs associated with this. And this review highlighted that the costs to employers is between 33 and 42 billion a year. So where staff are not supported, often they're not as productive. Therefore, getting it right will have a positive impact on the setting, not only on productivity, but also on cost. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, as I'm sure you're aware of what we mean by employee wellbeing. We should look at employee wellbeing and their experience at work from a holistic view and ask ourselves, do they have what they need to do their best at work? A proactive approach towards workplace wellbeing needs to be taken to avoid practitioners from being unhappy, unmotivated and unproductive. Practitioners, as we know, often work long hours under stressful conditions and spend a huge amount of time in the nursery, often up for 40 hours plus a week. Next slide, please. One of the most important things that needs to be done as a first step is to assess how well you're doing supporting your staff team's health and wellbeing needs. And there's no one size fits all. It's about designing a wellbeing strategy and its contents based on the unique needs of your setting and practitioners that are within it. And there are a number of things that you might want to think about and evaluate regarding employee wellbeing before pulling together a strategy. And some of these considerations that you could make are, you know, what are the levels of stress and how is it currently managed? Are leaders and managers confident in supporting conflict resolution and dealing with difficult conversations? Is there an open and inclusive culture? Are people management strategies and policies that are in place, are they effective? Are they tested? And how's sickness absence managed? Do you carry out return to work interviews and make sure that sickness isn't directly related to the job that they're doing? Next slide, please. Work demands and workloads, work hours, work-life balance, all challenges. How effective does a setting manage it? We know that there is a massive shortage of staff in the sector at the moment, and it can often lead to staff having to take on extra responsibility and getting burnt out. There might be ways which you could deploy a team differently. Often nurseries open from 7 till 7 and some even longer. Due to these long hours, some providers deploy staff on a 3-day rota and give them 4 days off. So there's opportunities to think about how you could do things differently. How are those positive relationships across the team and between staff and managers? Is team working strong? Is there respect for each other? Is there a really open and collaborative culture within the nursery? Have you got plans in place for supporting professional development and staff progression, and consider succession planning and offer developmental growth to staff in anticipation for losing key staff? We know that many managers are put into positions without the training that they need. One thing that's really important is thinking about communication, and two-way communication with your staff is key. Being involved in decision making will help to improve staff wellbeing, and asking them what could be done differently, for example, the working hours. Use surveys with practitioners so you can gauge how they feel. Some people want personalised support, but by asking questions, you can understand what kind of wellbeing strategy you might want to offer your practitioners. A study that I read recently really resonated with me around staff wellbeing. The study wasn't specifically for early years, but it found that more than half of respondents, 56% of respondents, felt undervalued and their efforts weren't recognised. Staff need recognition to feel valued. And if your practitioners don't feel valued, they won't be having an enjoyable time at work. So recognition is all another part of being able to support staff wellbeing. It doesn't have to be costly to support staff and to give them training. You can do work shadowing, coaching, mentoring less experienced staff, using your more experienced staff, to support your less experienced staff. That's totally effective. And things like making time in team meetings to celebrate achievements, that also creates that morale boost and it's another way of improving your staff wellbeing. We recognise that increasing pay is difficult due to a number of reasons, and I know this is the biggest outgoing cost for nursery providers, and I can't ignore, but I don't want to dwell on the fact that you know, the hourly rate being paid by government as the biggest purchaser of early education places, you know, is not sufficient and a struggle for settings. Nursery owners tell us that they'd love to pay staff more, and they know that staff deserve higher salaries that improve wellbeing and quality of life, but that's a real challenge for them. I just want to tell you about another couple of pieces of research carried out by EPI, Education Policy Institute, and that showed that many practitioners are themselves recipient benefits. And a review that was carried out last year by Sutton Trust in 2020 demonstrates that the early years sector has got the biggest percentage of benefit recipients than any other occupation, and that's at 45%. But if increasing pay is a barrier, nurseries can consider other benefits as well that they could provide staff. Simple benefits that nurseries have done, such as celebrating practitioners' birthdays or work anniversaries, and maybe offering a treat on that day. I've heard examples where cards and flowers have been sent to staff on milestone anniversaries and how delighted they've been to receive these. Encourage and facilitate social interaction, but don't forget to ask staff what they would like to do and how it'd work for them. And if you've got a budget, let them know so what they're suggesting can be realistic. There are other benefits such as employees' healthcare cash plans, and that may be affordable for some. Some plans cost around £5 per practitioner per year, and they find that a great benefit because they're able to claim back money towards dental treatment and eye care, for example. Many nurseries already offer free food where practitioners eat lunch with the children, and although it's good for children's social interaction, practitioners have told us that it's really popular, highly appreciated and highly valued, as it offers huge cost savings for them from providing their own. So within the report produced by Anna Freud, there were lots of useful information as well to support staff wellbeing, to be able to embed it in the workplace. And we made our staff wellbeing policy template available there for everyone in the sector, which was included within the report. Happy to put a link in the chat for you all to that. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to finish off by sharing a few case studies with you. Lots of nurseries told us that due to financial constraints, the pandemic was a difficult time for them too. However, they all wanted to do what they could to support staff during these difficult times, both from a nursery and a staff team perspective. So this case study here is from Juice Nursery. So when food supplies were tricky to obtain for staff, this nursery sent home care packages to staff as the nursery catering supplies were still being delivered. They set up a couple of closed Facebook groups so that staff and parents could share ideas and activities to keep everybody occupied whilst at home. They used Facebook to check in with each other, to offer support and encouragement, to get through those tough times. And they said that these went down really well with both staff and parents. One thing that went down particularly well was that they filmed themselves reading stories. So staff were filming themselves reading stories. And they were shared via the Facebook pages, and also they saved them to the nursery YouTube channel. And they were really amazed how many hits they got. Staff said this gave them a real sense of purpose during lockdown when the nursery was closed. The nursery manager and owners went on training courses to see what more they could do during that period of time while the nursery was closed. They took the opportunity to do that, to be able to support staff well-being. And it prompted them to go back and carry out a mental health risk assessment and engage with the team for feedback on where they felt they needed more support. And that was so the nursery could build it into the plans. During the pandemic, they also had regular check-ins with staff, which were separate to supervision. And basically, they were just informal chats with each of them to see how they were feeling, what concerns they had, and whether there might be anything they could do to help. So that was something the setting wanted to continue to do, and they have, but it has been difficult for them with the staffing issues and finding time to get staff out of the rooms to keep up that momentum. Time was taken to have catch up with staff and check-ins with staff who was returning to work following furlough. Some of them were very nervous about being back in the setting, and these check-ins were really valuable in ensuring staff had what they needed to support them to return to work. Next slide, please. This is a case study from Little Lambs, and they consider staff wellbeing as an essential part of staff returning to work, but also continuing to work. And they continue to do all the usual things and all the usual practices around staff wellbeing. But specifically during the pandemic, they also introduced some new measures to support staff. They sent out staff wellbeing questionnaires prior to returning to work from furlough, and to those who continued to work, to see if there was any support that staff needed. And this support was to support staff to feel safe and comfortable when they were returning back to the setting. They opened TikTok accounts, made weekly TikToks through the first lockdown until December 2020. And that was to cheer up parents and families who were possibly where children weren't coming into nursery. But that gave staff a real boost each week as they got something to focus on and cheer them up. All staff involved found this to be a massive support for the mental health and wellbeing. During the first lockdown, when they remained open with just a small number of staff, as most staff chose to be furloughed for a number of different reasons. And during these 3 months of lockdown, between March and June 2020, the staff that remained received a 20% bonus on top of the wage, because the nursery was so grateful to the risk they were putting themselves in to care for the key worker staff's children. The nursery regularly taking treats now, and they give staff a boost and make them feel appreciated. They've set up hot chocolate stands, biscuits, cakes, and this summer they ordered Domino's pizza for all staff for lunch as a thank you for the hard work and commitment. They also held a staff summer party, and each member of staff received a chocolate orange and a voucher, £10 voucher to say thank you for the hard work. So the nursery owner thinks it's extremely important to support staff wellbeing and mental health, especially during these difficult years and months that we've just had, because she knows that staff need to feel safe and secure when they're at work. Sometimes staff have private and personal issues. When in work, they need to be able to focus, as the role of a practitioner is so important. So she believes that having these check-ins is really important with the staff. Staff feel positive and they feel that they're really supported by their employer. They feel able to achieve the job and the goals. When the nursery provided this case study, they provided it just before World Mental Health Day. And in that week running up to World Mental Health Day, they did one thing every day to try and have some fun and boost morale. They did a present tombola on the Monday. They did a breakfast on the Tuesday for staff. They told staff they could wear what they wanted on Wednesday. They did a throw a custard pie at a member of the management team after work on Thursday, and it really made me smile when she said to me, needless to say, it went down very well. And then they did cake on Friday. The nursery owner said, looking after my employees' health and well-being means they aren't just a number to me. I support each individual and I need to care for their everyday lives, which will contribute to their work performance. Staff who are happy, supported and feel safe will stay employed and be committed to the company. She told me that she got a really low staff turnover and each year, and she regularly asks the staff how she can help them, whether that's just a 5-minute conversation with them or at monthly meetings with staff. But it takes time to find out what's going on in their lives, because she believes it helps her in the long term. She found that the impact of supporting staff, treating staff and making them feel appreciated has gone a long way, not only for her own personal mental health, as being kind to others has made her feel good, but also for them. It makes them feel appreciated and happy to come to work, and she feels able. She's pleased that they feel able to be open and honest with the senior leaders, because that also makes such a difference to the group and the setting as a whole. So I hope you found the information and the suggestions and the case studies useful. Thank you, and I'll pass back over to you, Tim.
Thank you so much, Stella. And I think it's amazing the way that you capture both the sort of in-depth research and also the detail of the practice, and to hold all that together in one presentation in a single vision is so incredibly impressive. So thank you so much for your contribution, Stella. In the next part, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Rachel Lyons about the resource that we put together with, and I'll go through that in a minute. And just to introduce you, Rachel is Deputy Principal Educational Psychologist working across 3 partner local authorities in the northwest of England. She's had specialist roles within Salford Educational Psychology Services in the areas of communication, interaction, and early years. Rachel's passionate about promoting and supporting positive mental health and wellbeing for both children and adults, and recently became involved in developing the early years version of Emotionally Friendly Settings program. She started off this resource, and this resource that we're going to talk about actually came from a call from Rachel when she got in touch about a similar piece of work that we've done for schools. So she was really key to kicking this whole process off. And throughout the process, I think the work that she and her colleagues did in the Northwest was amazing. It enriched the data, the survey data, with the lived experience of staff. And Rachel was absolutely committed to make sure that the co-production was at the heart of this resource. And I think that's a really important message to the involvement of staff. And her commitment to this principle shines through every page of the resource and make it what it is. So Rachel's going to talk about this shortly. But I'm going to start by talking about some of the survey findings, and then Rachel will talk about some of the more detailed qualitative findings that were part of this project. Can I have the next slide, please? So the lucky phone call, that was when Rachel got in touch and said, look, I've seen the school's wellbeing work, which is a piece of work that I worked on. Can we do something on early years? And we did. And I think one of the important things, one of the key things was realizing at an early stage how we all needed help to do this well, but if we drew on the experiences of a number of local authorities, the NDNA, our own specialists that we have, the Anna Freud Centre, we could produce a really rich document. And from that, we started really, I suppose, pulling together some of the learnings from people actually working on the grassroots to really get that sense of what is the experience of working, and then thinking how we can, through the surveys, really try and understand that and share best practice. And I think the other thing to say is, we're really conscious, and this comes out in the survey quite a lot, that all settings are different. There's a whole range of different contexts in which you work, the different sizes and so on. And what we're not trying to do is say, this is how you do well-being. What we're saying is, everyone's different, every setting's different. You've all got different ways of doing things, but here's a range of different thoughts and findings which have come from the start, from the workforce itself, and choose the ones that you think you can best apply to your settings. And we hope you'll find them really, really helpful. It's quantitative and qualitative. So it started off with the survey, and that gives some really good, I think, top headlines. But the richness comes out of the qualitative work. And I think that's also what's been translated, I think, very nicely into a number of resources that are actually within the document itself. In terms of limitation, I mean, Stella was very clear about some of the hardships that early years workers face. You know, we know that, you know, low income, being underpaid is correlated with lower well-being. We can't address that in this document. And I think what we were very clear at the start is saying this is actually really focusing on what individual settings can do rather than questioning the whole policy picture. So the next slide, please. So this is the survey findings. Almost 1,500 people responding, overwhelmingly female, largely white. And one of the, you know, it would be very nice to do this with a huge survey and see what the differences was between different groups, different ethnicities, and different identities. But we weren't able to do that on this occasion. We can't break the figures down. 44% of people, that's almost half, were nursery or preschool workers. A third were managers. And I think there's some interesting findings there that we can have a look at. Almost 3/4 of the settings had less than 20 members of staff. And 2/3 were in the private sector, 1/5 in local authority, and a small number of charities. One of the interesting things about this is that actually there's very little difference from this survey in how people felt about their work. There was a consistency across the different sectors. And there was a lot of consistency across, in most areas, across staff and managers. So these are findings that apply across the board in many ways. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first finding is that most people, most early years practitioners, are happy in their work. This is consistent, whatever the size of the setting, and for all managers and staff. So almost 62% said they were always, often, work had always or often a positive impact. And I think that's really, really inspiring to hear, that. However, there's 1/3, which is a significant minority, said that work only sometimes had a positive impact on your mental health or well-being. Now, I've translated that, that's almost 100,000 people. So there's a certain number of people there who are struggling some of the time. And if we think about Stella's slides about, performance, and part of the human element of really wanting to, care and look after your staff, performance and all those other issues, it really makes sense to try and find out, what we can do about that. 5% said they hardly ever enjoyed, said it hardly ever improved their health and well-being. But having said that, almost half reported having felt unwell as a result of work-related stress in the last year, and that is a worrying figure. And again, it's a reminder of how much we need to look at in all our work settings. That's a large figure, and I think it's something that we need to bear in mind. Can I have the next slide, please? And what makes you feel stressed? Well, workload and work-life balance. Now, there's some things that you can do about that, but it's also it's a pressurized workplace. And I think that, some of the suggestions that come out of the qualitative work, okay, there's some ideas for that. But a lot of the other issues are around administration and paperwork. So here you can see people, paperwork, concerns about business pressures, Ofsted and so on. And although people said things like, mental health of their children and some of the concerns over the difficulties managing behaviour, which is inevitably stressful, they were about half the rate of some administrative rate. So it's interesting to see where the pressure points are, and that can help you think about, what should we focus on when we're focusing on well-being. Next slide, please. Do you feel supported at work? These slides we shared afterwards. I know there's a lot of detail on this, but I'll just give you the headlines. So it's pretty good. 70% agreed or strongly agreed that senior staff care about your mental health. 63% also said senior staff take proactive steps to support mental health. we get a strong message of a caring environment. 60% felt encouraged to talk about mental health. However, only 40% said there was a regular slot allotted to discussing mental health well-being. And I think that's really interesting because it's about sort of providing space, and whether that's wall space or a room. And I know that, often settings don't have any spare spaces, but how can you make those spaces available? Are they necessarily on site? But to make sure that people have the chance to talk about things and feel confident. And what helps reduce, next slide, please, stress at work? Well, here we have it, more information. This is what people want, more information, better support from other members of staff. And that's not saying staff aren't supportive. It's saying, perhaps people are very busy, perhaps it's not in the culture of the setting, and making these offers of the space to talk about, including on meetings, including on any supervision, having quiet spaces where that's possible. Someone said, the quiet space in an early years setting, you must be kidding, that's the last thing we want. But I think there are, there's getting that balance between the space for staff and then the social Stella also spoke about. And the next slide, please. This is really interesting, I think. Do you have wellbeing policies? Well, 47% say they have a wellbeing policy in place. 24% said no, 29% said don't know. Don't know is as good as no, really, because if you don't know about a policy, it's not really worth having. It's difficult as a manager, sharing information all the time. But if you do have one, can you make sure, how can you make sure that that's shared and people are aware of it? But one of the interesting things is that when we look further, this is where managers are slightly different. 59% of managers said there was a wellbeing policy in place, and only 37% of staff said they were in place. And interestingly as well, staff working in a setting without a policy were 20% more likely to say they had felt unwell as a result of work-related stress. So there's a direct correlation between policies and feeling well, or in well-being, and that's really at the heart of this document. And probably one of the best ways of making sure people know that there is a policy in place is by co-producing one with them, because that way they will know there's a policy in place, know exactly what it's about. And finally, the last slide I just want to look at is, where do you seek help? This is actually very similar to schools. People often talk about speaking to friends and families, going outside their setting as well as colleagues. But the learning is broadly, you enjoy your work, but half of you have felt unwell because of stress in the last 12 months. Simple changes can make a difference. Making the right noises is not enough. How do you make sure that your culture breathes well-being? How do you make sure that at every part of a person's journey through any unhappiness they're experiencing, there's an opportunity to talk about it? Visibility of inviting people to talk about mental health, posters on walls publicly, not just in the staff room, helplines, just making sure they're part of team meetings and so on. And that's really what creates a culture. And in the end, culture is everything. So that's really the findings. But I think what Rachel's now going to talk about is the really interesting part, which is what staff themselves said about their experience of wellbeing at work. Over to you, Rachel.
This resource is drawn very much from the experiences of staff. Alongside the survey, we were keen to capture the richness of people's experiences working across a variety of early years settings, which included playgroups, preschools, nurseries, and early years staff within schools, to ensure that we captured what was happening across these settings and to celebrate it. I knew from working with linked settings both before and during the pandemic that so much takes place on a daily basis to support one another within settings, and especially so during these challenging times as a result of the pandemic. And we were also keen to ensure that any recommendations that we made within this resource were realistic and achievable within busy settings. So we very much wanted them to come from what practitioners were telling us. We worked with 21 practitioners through 4 virtual workshops across 4 local authorities. which, although a small sample, gave us a huge amount of rich detail and information and built on the higher number of responses that we got to the survey. The sessions were an absolute whirlwind of emotions to hear the huge challenges, stresses and anxieties that staff had faced, as well as the lengths that they'd gone to support their own wellbeing and their children's wellbeing throughout the lockdowns. The sessions were really positive and uplifting despite the difficult circumstances that were being shared. The staff loved their work and were passionate about their jobs and the people that they work with, and that really shone through. We audio recorded and transcribed the sessions so we could combine themes from all 4 workshops and used a process of coding and sorting called thematic analysis. And this led to 4 broad themes, which we hope was the most useful way and accessible way to share the ideas in an easy to understand and takeaway format. So I'll run through the 4 themes now before I go on to share some of the resources that we developed off the back of that you can take away and use in your setting. Supporting each other was the first theme, and this seems like an obvious one, but we were keen to get the detail of what this means on a day-to-day basis, so settings and practitioners can take away ideas and start to run with them straight away. So a main theme was around time, the time to feel really listened to one another, to feel that you have that time for each other, for connection, for discussions, for just day-to-day chats, as well as being open. And that's about wellbeing being normalised and always on the agenda, part of open and honest daily conversations, not just something that you talk about within supervision sessions at a set time of the month, but just something that everyone is checking in with each other around all the time. A shift from a just survive mentality to a helping each other thrive mindset. And this being modelled across the setting and at all levels, as that's what builds trust. If staff can see their managers and colleagues being open and honest, they will feel encouraged too as well. Mental health and wellbeing boards can raise awareness and prompt discussion. And one setting discussed how they had a motivation board so that they could provide lots of local information, as well as put up little messages to staff to provide each other with boosts. Also shared often was the importance of getting to know one another and people's interests outside of work, as this is what leads to personalised conversations, as well as gifts, and getting a sense of what people like to do outside of work and who they are outside of the nursery setting. So that rewards or treats are individualised rather than everyone getting the same chocolate bar or a bottle of wine. And that was spoken about by the practitioner as something that felt really touching and really important. And as I mentioned, where possible, ensuring that you have that time to connect, regular social opportunities, from little check-ins if you notice someone seems a bit down or not quite themselves, through to planned team events wherever possible. A second strong theme was that of supportive managers and support for managers. Support managers could offer was around those little ways of recognising and acknowledging each other's efforts and continued efforts and hard work on a daily basis, from positive comments or notes, either during team meeting activities or in an anonymous way. And one practitioner shared how they'd regularly done a little activity where you got positive notes from other colleagues, and it was done in an anonymous way, you didn't know who it was, and she kept these up on the inside of her locker, and she talked about how that was just a daily boost every day when she came into work and she could open up a door and see these little notes from her colleagues. Offering flexibility was another important theme, where you allow people to leave early if ratios allow, and just generally being aware of what's going on in people's lives outside of work and taking that into consideration. For example, giving time to allow people to go to important events, perhaps linked to their own children or their family members, like school assemblies or hospital appointments that you've got to take family members to, or just reducing pressure or workloads at times of stress for a particular individual. Support for managers or team leaders is also vital. Managers often act as a container for the stress of others and a buffer against the external factors that threaten to lower staff morale. So managers and team leaders need others to turn to as well, both within the workplace and outside of the workplace. And managers' networks were talked of often by staff as a way in which managers can seek this external support, get other ideas, but just feel listened to and have a chance to offload, especially if they're feeling like they're containing a lot of other people's stress and they want to protect their stress and their team from that stress. As well as leaning on the support of colleagues, a manager of one setting said that she'd been going through a really tricky time and that staff had joined together to buy her a really meaningful present. And she shared how supported and valued that made her feel. And she talked about the importance of herself being open and honest with her staff when she herself was going through a tricky time at work, sort of modelling that the discussions around well-being are open and transparent for everyone. Having clear pathways of support is important so that people know who to access support from and in what way, and the different tiers of support that can be offered and available. And we've put together a resource that can support you thinking about those different levels of support, which I'll show you at the end. Considering the physical environment is also important. So this idea of safe spaces for staff to access. So how you can offer space for confidential conversations, how staff can signal a need for space or support for the day. For example, after dealing with a complex safeguarding issue or a difficult conversation with a parent, they might need to just go and have a sit down, have a break, have a debrief with a member of staff. Are there mechanisms in place to allow that? Is there somewhere safe and confidential staff can go to? Is there somewhere relaxing that they can go to during their break? Is there a place for staff to connect at lunchtimes and break times? Creature comforts and little touches were frequently mentioned. So those toiletries in the bathroom seem really important and help people feel welcomed and valued. Tea and coffee in the kitchen, alongside little treats and like snacks at key points in the year. It's a way to sort of like celebrate and bring people together at lunchtime. And it was felt that they very much communicate thoughtfulness and that staff are valued by the management team and by each other when it's a team effort. Having easy access to wellbeing information, so posters, leaflets, phone numbers about local things that promote and support wellbeing. People are feeling very anxious or particularly worried. They may not feel able to make that first step or seek support out. So it's helpful to have that information easily available. And it also reinforces the idea that wellbeing is something that is applicable to everybody and something that is being discussed regularly within your setting. And getting out of the building wherever possible, whether that's team events, staff wellbeing days, a lunchtime walk, walking supervision, or doing fun things. Some settings talked about the challenge of the pandemic and not being able to meet up socially. So they did wear your glad rags to work day, where they all get dressed up and just came to work. It's a way to acknowledge that although team nights out haven't been possible, their importance is recognised and valued. And the fourth theme was around getting that external support when appropriate. So having networks and connections both within and outside the setting is seen as being highly supportive, especially so for managers. So have peer buddies or wellbeing leads who are not in a management or performance monitoring role can help people in settings feel more able perhaps to be open and to seek support without it feeling like it's an escalation or something that's going to be linked to their performance management. So lunchtime drop-in sessions themed around wellbeing, which was led by that setting's wellbeing champion or lead, was felt to be particularly helpful, or having a few different wellbeing buddies or peer buddies across the setting that people know they could go to. Setting up local networks between settings can be really helpful. So whether that's between managers as part of a manager network or between different wellbeing buddies or people who are interested in wellbeing across other local settings can come together and share ideas. And it's also really helpful to make it clear and transparent how support from trained mental health practitioners can be accessed. So managers or wellbeing leads or peer buddies are confident to know when it's time to seek more specialist support and how that can be done. And a wellbeing policy can be an effective way of capturing both the informal and more formal forms of support and how this is communicated to the staff team. And as with anything, allowing people to be proactive in looking after their own wellbeing is important. So working on reducing stress long term rather than just seeking support when things become more difficult. So there's always this buffer or reservoir of good well-being or positive feeling that can help through more challenging times, whether this is through strategies such as mindfulness And some staff talked about how they'd started to do daily mindfulness with the children during the pandemic, and that it expanded them to doing it as staff team, walking supervision, exercise, having planned exercise classes at the setting at the end of the day was something that some settings shared, sharing of hobbies, spending time with friends and family, just all of those things that we know support our own individual well-being in a proactive and ongoing way. So based on the 4 themes, we created a tool that we hope you'll be able to take away and use, that summarises the information gathered and makes it as accessible as possible. So for each of the 4 themes I've just talked through, we highlighted some key examples of good practice that early years practitioners have shared with us, and we've put them into this working document. So you can start to think about how you can apply them to your setting, maybe celebrate where you've got these things in place already, and identify some next steps. So we'd very much suggest that you work through this document as a team and in an ongoing way. You don't have to do everything at once, but think about what would be most valuable in your setting to start with. And there's a coding system that you can use to help you identify what's a priority. And the idea is for you to write down your actions in the middle column and then grade your priorities in the final column. So this becomes a working document and something you can keep returning to over time. And it may help to put some dates or timelines on the actions and share those actions out across the team, because you do want to communicate the sense that well-being and looking after each other is a team effort. So it's not down to just one person or one manager, but something that everybody is doing all of the time in order to support each other and make your setting a positive place to work. So in getting started, you can dive straight into the tools I've just shown you on the previous slide, or you can download the individual activities, such as the poster on this slide that raises awareness about the resource to begin with, and it can prompt some interest and discussion, which you can then use in team meetings using the downloadable activities that are available on the Anna Freud website. It's essential, as I mentioned, that this is done as a collaborative team effort rather than something that one person or a management team does in isolation, as mental health and well-being is everyone's responsibility, so you want to get everyone involved. Got to make well-being an ongoing priority rather than something that you just do as a one-off event. This will also help it feel more manageable and achievable, especially if there's a few different things that you want to put into practice. When thinking about actions and your next steps, make sure you keep it manageable. And ratio is one way to help with this, which stands for realistic. Can you do it in your setting right now? Or is it something that you need to return to? Achievable. Is it a sensible and practical idea? Time bound. What time frame will the action take place in? Implementable. What will be your first step to getting it done? And observable. What will practitioners see that is different as a result of that action? Activity 2, shown on this slide, provides you with some question prompts you can use in team discussions and team meetings to get conversations about staff wellbeing started. There's an activity that can help you plan and prepare for holding meetings about wellbeing if this is something you haven't done or had much experience of doing before, which I will show you on the next slide. And there is also a handout on considering support in different ways. As I mentioned, having different types of support available for people at different times of need, so that support is accessible for everyone, depending on where their wellbeing and mental health is at that time. Other suggestions would be to review, write or rewrite your staff wellbeing policy as a team. This really should be done collaboratively to have the biggest impact, so everyone feels like they contributed to it, they understand what's in the policy, they know where the policy is kept, and it's kept up to date. Display your staff wellbeing policy publicly, so everyone, parents, staff and children can all see it and can all recognise that wellbeing is high on the agenda within your setting. And include a section on staff wellbeing as a standing item at all staff meetings and meetings with trustees or owners of the setting. So again, it's seen that wellbeing and everyone's mental health is prioritised within your setting. Consider running a staff wellbeing survey, and the Anna Freud Centre are currently developing a tool that can support you to do that. Or you might want to write one yourself, using perhaps some of the themes and the headings that have come out of this resource. Consider putting up a board about your interests, or a wellbeing board, or a connection board, or a motivation board, where you can share, individuals can share their hobbies, their interests, and this can be useful for settings and for parents. So lots of settings now seem to be using the one-page formats that they use with the children for themselves, which again just allows you to introduce yourself and prompt some conversation around perhaps areas of shared interest. Have an area which signposts to services, whether this is on your wellbeing policy or your wellbeing board, but there are a number of organisations who can help staff who are struggling with their mental health and wellbeing. So it's good to signpost to those so staff have got easy access to them if needed. Make a list of some of the lighter things to improve wellbeing, like positive slips, compliment cards, treats, toiletries, the quick wins that you can put in place fairly easily. Think about how you can build flexible working into your setting. And lots of practitioners talked about using apps such as WhatsApp or communication outside of the setting as being really supportive and positive if they were able to send each other positive messages, so share good news. But it's also helpful to balance that with boundarying times in which people can connect to each other or get in touch with each other. So some settings had a limit around out of hours texting, emailing and calling unless it was an emergency. So it's thinking about the pros and cons of using things like WhatsApp and having some rules around that so that everybody feels happy and safe with how it's being used. And where possible, set up a buddying system for staff and for managers to provide support, and think about that support as not being hierarchical and just being for managers down, but think about how people can support each other across rooms through things like wellbeing leads and buddies of support. And remember that all actions should be in ratio. So think about what's realistic and what's achievable. So this slide shows the downloadable sections on planning team meetings around mental health and wellbeing, and how you might structure those to make sure that they're safe and everyone feels able to contribute, as well as guidance on writing a wellbeing policy, which we'd very much recommend as a starting point for all settings. And this handout supports you to think about how support can be offered in different ways, depending on people's different needs at different times. As I mentioned, it's important to have support available to everyone at all times to really promote good wellbeing and allow people to thrive, alongside support that can be put in place or accessed if people are experiencing particular challenges or real difficulties at a certain time. Hopefully those resources will be useful and something that you can take away and start using within your settings.
Hi, hello, and welcome to you all. Today I have been invited to join the Anna Freud Centre webinar on a topic that's quite dear to myself, as well as I'm sure it's dear to many of the listeners out there today. I've been an attendee myself on Anna Freud Centre webinars where I have benefited from listening and taking part, as well as it benefiting my practice at my setting. So today my presentation will be based on my experiences as an early years educator, as a manager, and it's only all my experiences that I have had throughout the years that have brought me to this. Where I started off my foundation years at Rooftop Nursery at one setting, moved along to another setting, to Ihsan Children's Centre and Nursery, where I developed further. It's the voluntary position I played, the supporting assistant I played, moving on to, playing the role of an early years educator, to moving on to doing some family outreach support work, and then at my current role, which is a nursery manager at Ihsan Nursery. And it's only all the various roles I have played that, and where I've been working, side by side with my colleagues, that I feel I'm now at a level where I feel I can relate to my staff, and vice versa, my staff can relate to me. And, we have more compassion towards one another. Next slide, please. What is well-being? I mean, it's a value and quality of being happy and having a resilient life that is made of our own choices and interests, If you think about it, mental health and wellbeing is like a huge umbrella with, lots of categories and strands, if you will. And any one of these categories can have a direct impact on staff delivery, on staff performance, and this subsequently has a direct impact on children and family under our care. So amongst a few barriers that the early years sector actually have, one of them being early years sector being a low paid sector, mental health and wellbeing is one of them. Yes, it was recognised pre-pandemic days, and yes, it is more now, it is now coming to focus more so now, and quite urgently because of the pandemic, the COVID-19 that we are facing. But it is, it's now, we're now finding ourselves trying to find, a middle ground where we're trying to emotionally balance ourselves. We're trying to ensure that our staff are emotionally balanced. We're trying to ensure that the children and families who are under our care are all emotionally balanced. And, we're trying to do all of this while we're trying to maintain, a good, positive physical environment. And it's all about balancing. We're putting ourselves out there. We're putting ourselves at the front line. And again, there's been lack of recognition there as well, where, nurseries are expected to continue running. It's just staff have been at such, they've been, working so hard to ensure that the quality care provision has been delivered to children in a safe manner. It's amazing work that all the earlier sectors out there have been doing at the moment. Next slide, please. So what is a happy workforce and a physical environment? I mean, what does it entail? What does it bring about for us as early years educators or early years staff? It reduces stress, it calms nerves, it increases concentration. There's clarity in reasoning and thinking. There's increasing in staff job satisfaction. And there are so many more benefits to having this kind of happy workforce and having a good, positive physical environment that staff can feel part of, where they're building their own cultural, setting. And of course, in all of this, we're trying to maintain this whilst expected to have such a high standard of, education and quality provision and care. Where staff are expected to, play such a high role. But the good thing is that staff find it a very rewarding role. Yes, it's challenging, but it's also extremely rewarding as well. We're trying to ensure that, children do have this brilliant start to their lives. It's their foundation years. It's literally, the building blocks of their lives. We're trying to feed their curious little minds. We're trying to teach them about diversity. We're trying to teach them and instill British values in them. We're trying to teach them about the rule of law. We're trying to teach them about democracy. We're trying to teach them so much in the short time that we have. And, on top of all that, we're trying to ensure that we're doing it following this statutory guidance, or ensuring that we've got this, inclusive curriculum that we're following through. At the end of the day, we're trying to include our, children's culture into our setting, just so they feel a source of comfort, just so they feel a sense of belonging. Literally credit to all earlier staff out there who work such hard, demanding jobs, but find it so satisfactory and rewarding. Next slide, please. So the role of early years, I mean, I've mentioned a few already in the previous slide, but in a sort of a nutshell, we're ensuring that we're following the safeguarding, we're following welfare requirements, and in this is the children's well-being that we've got to, factor in. Now, if staff well-being is down there, children's well-being will be even lower. If staff well-being is up there, and the children's well-being and mental health will be up there. Why do you think this is? Okay, so children actually have this natural instinct. It's nature to them. They pick up the vibes. They see, they observe very quietly. They see and they observe and they learn a lot. They can pick up from staff what their moods are like. It can be from staff if staff are quite happy and content with themselves. It comes out in staff's teaching, it comes out in staff's interaction, it comes out in staff communication. And this all has a direct impact on children, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. So again, if staff mood levels are up there, then the children's well-being and mood levels are going to be even higher because they're going to be thriving off one another. So another thing that we do is we're trying to ensure that we're always filling the developmental progression. You know, we're trying to fill the gaps for children. We've got cultural capital that we're trying to include in all of this. I mean, here are some pictures from my setting where we're trying to sort of give a broad experience to children from all backgrounds, whether if they are from an advantaged background or a disadvantaged background. If they come from a family who have English as no language, and so they're missing out on a lot of experiences. You know, there are so many different scenarios that could be raised here where children are literally missing out on broad experiences. We went to a fire engine, and one of our nursery children, bless her, wanted to be a fire girl, and she saw the firefighters coming down the pole. She sat in the fire engine. She heard the siren going off. She saw the blue lights going round. So it was a lovely experience for her. And in the nursery, she's putting out the fire using her hose and dressed as a fire girl. We've got bricklaying there. We've got woodwork there with real hammers and toy hammers, with real nails and real pieces of wood, real clamps. You know, it's about giving them that sort of experience. So we're trying to bring in so much into the setting. We're trying to prepare our children for reception. You know, this is their foundation years. Again, we're trying to, you know, build them up. We promote positive, you know, relationships. Again, that's through interaction. Again, children observe, they see, they hear. And this is, you know, they could easily pick up a good positive relationship between staff and staff member, how they're talking to each other, or how management is talking to staff, or how staff are talking to the caretakers or parents and carers, or other service users that come to your setting. And the main thing is how we're talking to our children, if we're at their level, how we're talking, are we smiling, do we show that positive? We're trying to have, you know, enabling environments. We're trying to ensure that the environment is such that it's accessible to all children of all abilities, and it's got them constantly thinking, geared up to wanting to explore. And send children, I mean, our special education needs children with disability or without, it's amazing because the amount of work that goes out for every single child, whether they send or not, it's a vast amount. It's quite huge, you know, the individual planning that we do behind children, the focused children, and then it's in the moment. It's if we're perhaps doing an activity that we set for our children, you know, we think we've got the whole week planned out for them. We know what we're doing because it's their interest, it's based on their needs, their interest goals from the week before. And we think we've got everything down to a T. You know, we spend over an hour trying to do good planning, come up with lovely ideas. And then guess what? On the day, it's all about perhaps moving away from the activity set out, because all of a sudden the child has found interest in something else, and you're having to just follow the child and go in the moment and work around the child, bringing her or his developmental gaps, you know, fulfilling them. So again, it's so much work we're putting behind children, and, you know, we enjoy it. It's what we do, and this is what we enjoy. Every single child is unique. Every single child matters at the end of the day. And our role that we have, we play it with such pride. And again, you know, there are so many other legislations and there are other statutory guidance that we must follow. So how are we supposed to, as EY staff, as, you know, early years staff, whether if we're early years educators or support staff or volunteers, or whether if we're caretakers working within the early years sector, it could be a range of roles in the early years sector, not just the practitioners. What about the management, the deputy manager? What about the nursery sector? There are so many roles that are part of the early years educators, and you just think that, what about us? You know, we're ensuring the best for our children, but we also need someone who we can fall back on as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, mental health and wellbeing has, you know, quite a few categories, and financial wellbeing, physical wellbeing. Today, you know, I just want to touch base on a few of these categories. So we've got emotional well-being, psychological well-being, and social well-being. Can I have the next slide, please? So emotional well-being is about having, a nice positive outlook on yourself. It's about your own emotional needs, your self-esteem, and resilience. But what is resilience? Resilience is being able to navigate your way through life when you're facing challenges, when you're facing concerns and difficulties. It's about bringing some of the positivity into your life. Psychological well-being. Now that's about positive relationships. It's about having, a nice, healthy state of mind, a feeling of purpose and meaning in life, and high levels of autonomy. High levels of autonomy in my workplace would look something like, it would look like planning, for example, weekly planning when staff have with the deputy manager. Staff may come with concerns that child X doesn't seem to be taking interest in this area and I don't know what to do. But this is what I'm thinking, actually. I've talked to the other staff, and this is what we're thinking of doing. Or, staff not conforming to negative negative attitudes and behaviours, almost setting a trend and a pattern in the workplace, which is, something nobody wants. It could be to do with staff facing challenges, dealing with parents, rather than coming to management or going to one another and saying, I have this problem, what shall I do? They will come and say, I have this problem. This is what I think I should do. What do you guys think? So that's an example of high level of autonomy in my setting. Social well-being. So again, it's about positive relationships, maintaining that between colleagues, and obviously any other service users. Nursery values, aims, and responsibilities. So every setting has their own values and aims, and I'm sure all staff adhere to that. A sense of belonging, and I think this is quite important because this is a little bit of piece. This is a small piece of everybody, of all individuals. It's about all staff coming from different walks of life, different experiences from their life, and it's about them bringing a bit of their own culture into the setting, and staff creating uniform sort of workplace culture which is unique to your own setting. It's about being valued and appreciated as an individual, colleague, and practitioner. So again, it's about respecting individuality, and I think it's quite highly important. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are the factors that impact staff wellbeing in the early years sector? So, it's a very low paid sector. It's definitely a very low paid sector, unfortunately, and it makes financial wellbeing a very low priority. There's poor paid progression, there's staff career progression, staff retention, there's lack of social recognition for early years educators, and some of the attitudes that we face from the general, people that you may speak to is, oh, you're an early years educator. It's actually perceived as a very easy option, which is such a shame, because I would love for anyone to challenge that and come down, work as an early years educator, actually see all the work that we put into it. It's not a nursery for children to come and play. There's so much more involved behind this, and I just wish, everybody would understand that a bit more better. It's also about the lack of recognition from other places, other organisations. So such as, we weren't given the option of being furloughed at all, and it was quite damaging for some of our staff. It's also about the testing. For example, very last lockdown, nurseries were expected to stay open. Other early education, other early education settings were, remained closed, and they were remotely teaching and learning. Yeah, we weren't getting the testing kits. We were not receiving any testing kits. Staff still had to go out to get tested. We were at the front line, with our children. Our staff had to travel by public transport, come into the setting, deal with the usual day-to-day sort of, life, go home feeling a little bit anxious because they've just mixed with a whole lot of children and other staff as well. And they're going home to their loved ones, to their children, to their siblings, elderly parents, whoever may be living with them in their household or whoever's within their bubble. And it's quite a shame because, as early educated staff, many of us quite rightly so felt a little bit not thought of for the lack of a better use of words. And this is all various factors why people actually choose to join the early years workforce. So this is some of the feedback from our staff at this time Children's Centre Nursery. They a longer list, but I've narrowed it down. So it's a very fulfilling role. You know, we have a very supportive environment. Early years educators actually are very, very, I should say, extremely passionate, you know, to see children thrive. A simple example of this would be an early, a child that comes in with selective mutism. You know, she doesn't talk, she doesn't make no facial gestures, she doesn't react to anything. But one day, out of the blue, she might smile, or she may say one word, you know, labeling something, maybe labeling an object. That is a huge milestone for us, you know. It brings such joy to us. It could be to do with a child who's not settling in, and 2 weeks later, he is coming in smiling and he is leaving smiling. That is, again, a huge milestone for us. It's a huge progress. So again, that brings such joy. So whereas something might be insignificant to others, it's a huge significant for us. And of course, you know, we get to have lots of training opportunities like this one as well. Next slide, please. Right, so this is some of the wellbeing that we did prior to the COVID-19, and I'm sure many settings, you know, do this as well, of course. You know, praising and appreciating your staff, you know, acknowledging them, having lots of team building days on Inset Day, you know, bring a dish day, signposting staff. So prior to COVID, we did have a clinical psychologist on board, and we'd have face-to-face appointments with a clinical psychologist. So we were able to do those referrals, but during the pandemic, obviously that was all over the phone. It's about creating and ensuring we have a safe space for our staff to, you know, spill out into. Staff were encouraged to keep journals, and with the resources that we provided, or, you know, by their own journal. We also told staff to make lots of voice notes on their phones, as, you know, as a track of journals, so that they can always listen back and reflect. Giving them lots of training opportunities and supervisions, and of course the short regular talks. We started this project called the Thought Cloud Project, which I will say my staff don't really use too much. I'll be quite honest there. It was a project introduced to me by one of my colleagues from the Children's Centre, and it's called Thought Cloud. So we have a display up in the staff room, and we have like a mind full of lots of things that this person's got to do throughout the day, and we've got a half a mind full with half the things. And staff have got the opportunity to use a post-it note and anonymously write their thoughts. So throughout the week, or by the end of the week, you know, we'd go and have a look at it and see what the vibes are like, you know, positive, negative. Are there too many negatives? If so, let's think about it, let's talk about it. But at the same time, you know, we'd like to see like a healthy balance of positive and negative. Next slide, please. So this is one of the pre-pandemic days where we had Bring a Dish, and we themed it around cultural food, and it was nice to see lots of different foods coming from, you know, different cultural backgrounds, and quite a few parents actually contributed to this as well, so that's quite nice. Next slide, please. For the COVID-19, during this time, it was a very, very testing time for everybody, and my heart goes out to anyone and everyone that suffered with, especially the initial stages of COVID-19, where the cases were rising and there were many deaths. So within, Islam Nursery is actually part of the Children's Centre, and we're part of a community, a wider community with people from different cultural backgrounds. So it was very difficult hearing, you know, lots of news almost on a daily basis, where there were deaths in the family, friends, loved ones, and again, you know, within the community. It's brought anxiety levels high, you know, panic attacks, you know, were going quite high, because there were lots of constant unfolding, you know, situations. So what did we do about this as a setting? We were looking out for one another. We were offering support during work hours, out of work hours, evenings and weekends as well. Believe it or not, we had to make ourselves available. We wanted to make ourselves available. We provided the relevant support. So again, clinical psychologists, that was over the phone. We reminded staff that all the steps that have taken to make Islam Children's Centre Nursery a safe working environment where they can feel safe. So we had the government guidelines that we were following to a T. We were testing twice a week. Despite not receiving the test, we had to go out and get tested. We had we ensured PPE was available. We offered vaccination at a slightly earlier date compared to other settings. I think it was between February and April, we had it rolled out to us. Testing twice a week. Oh, sorry, I said that. Flexible working options and hours. We created additional risk assessments for COVID-19. I worked alongside with my colleague from the Children's Centre, and the COVID risk assessment was quite big. It's only now narrowed down quite a bit. We increased regular cleaning, and we're passing on messages that were coming from external professionals. So whether if it's from Hackney Education, who's my local authority, whether if it's from the Mail, other councillors. Next slide, please. So this is, well, I can't say post-pandemic, post-COVID, because COVID is still around, very much so, but following the government guidelines, no, we're not in any bubbles anymore. So our inset day has been, this is our very recent inset day, and it's been an absolute joy to have all staff, not separated with bubbles, but all staff together and enjoying a lovely team building day, sharing the dishes that they brought, and having meaningful conversations and bonding. Next slide, please. And we did a secret gift exchange, and by secret it was quite anonymous. We ensured all staff had to wrap their presents in newspapers, because we have 1 or 2 staff members that have particular wrapping paper, especially old Christmas wrapping papers from last year. So we decided it's going to remain anonymous. Everyone has to wrap their presents in newspaper. And this was actually a really nice gesture, because we had a bit of a small wish list, and whatever we could do, we did. And it was really, really nice. A lot of staff were quite, they were really felt heartfelt with this gesture. Next slide, please. So this is our rainbow room. It's our new sensory room, and Deputy Manager Fazana actually likes to bring her one-to-one discussions to our new sensory room. It's got a massive, really huge, gigantic bean bag in there, and staff tend to sit and relax on it. And if they, require additional quieter space, then they come here to feel quite refreshed and calm. Next slide, please. So I attend lots of webinars and read lots of materials and listen to podcasts, etc., for my own personal development, so that I can bring better practices into the nursery. But I came across this in one of the webinars. It says management and leaders should display resilience, healthy behaviours, promoting emotional well-being and mental health support through positive, informed choices and interventions. And I thought back about it, and I thought it's not about dictating, yeah, we'll do this with you and we'll do that with you, and yeah, we'll just gotta get together and have a short talk over a cup of tea and cake, or whatever the norm is in the setting. It's also about management. We're about the management. What are we doing for ourselves? We're there for everybody else. What about us? So thinking back and reflecting for myself as a nursery manager, I was thinking, who's there to support me? But pondering on all of this, it made me realise actually I had my local authority behind us. We had lots of regular phone calls and email alerts, updates for training. We had a few management network meetings, which were really good. And the management board members and trustees were behind us as well from my setting. So extending support to staff and supervisions for myself. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, I will say, we're not part of one of the settings that don't actually have a wellbeing sort of policy in place. We haven't used any wellbeing audits or toolkits or anything as such. It's all based on the learning that I'm doing and trying to promote into the workplace. But my next steps for my setting would be having a wellbeing action plan, having a wellbeing policy, and having a few mental health first aiders. And I look forward to working with professionals to hopefully implement this into my setting. Going forward, points to consider. It would be really nice to have a day in the life of an early years practitioner. This is going out to all policymakers. Hopefully, it should result in positive changes for the early years sector, and networking between other early years settings. So not the usual professional development network meetings, but meetings where other early years get together and discuss any concerns they may have and what they do about it. Next step, please. So, to summarise, a positive impact on staff wellbeing is supportive management, supportive colleagues. So again, colleagues supporting one another and colleagues can support management. Positive physical environment, signposting to relevant agencies, acknowledging, appreciating and recognising. Next slide, please. So these are a list. This is a list that's been narrowed down. I have a list. These are the useful websites for training, resources, webinars, whether if it's Instagram or podcast. And I hope you find this useful. Next slide, please. And finally, just to end off on the notes, I'd like to thank Anna Freud Centre. I'd like to thank Penny, who introduced me to Anna Freud Centre, and thank Salma, who's my colleague, who's been a pillar of strength and support for me throughout the years. And of course, thanks to all my team members who've been very supportive at Islam Children's Centre and Nursery. Also, hats off to all early years staff, whether if you're a caretaker, a volunteer, support assistant, early years educator, management, or above. Hats off to everybody. I think we're doing a fantastic job, and it's only with our passion that we see ourselves thriving. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you so much, Asiya, for a brilliant talk, and so for both in terms of methodology, in terms of research, but also in terms of simply wanting to do the best for your teams and for your children. And as someone said, I don't have a question to ask, but thank you for really talking about the early years sectors. We want to talk about it, and that was a fantastic talk. We have just a few minutes left now, and we're just going to have a quick discussion based on some of the questions that we've had. And I just wonder if the speakers could join us now. One of the interesting questions here, and wellbeing mental health sometimes can get very complicated. And I've got a question here about if someone working with someone who's experiencing anxiety and depression and maybe is taking a lot of time off work, and a lot of work goes into supporting this person, but still sometimes it can be still very hard for a manager to manage someone who's really struggling in their own lives. Has anyone got any sort of tips or thoughts, thoughts about an approach that might be helpful and supportive in those sorts of situations? Because, inevitably mental health can be a very difficult issue to have at work. I don't know, Stella, if you've got any thoughts on that.
I think it is a challenge. I think, it's hard to balance that frustration and the support. Obviously, you've got children, a staff to child ratio, which can be difficult, but often there's organisations such as occupational health that may be able to support and put measures, help you to be able to put measures in place. I think, like I say, it is a difficult and challenging one, but it's trying to get to the bottom and unpick and understand what that problem is, because maybe it's hiding somewhere, and unpicking and understanding it, you might be able to understand, you might be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and perhaps working with that practitioner when they are well, on a very regular and ongoing basis, to think about what their sort of like wellbeing plan is and what they have in place. So they perhaps don't get to a crisis point, or perhaps don't only seek support when they're having to take time off work, but you're checking in with them on a more regular basis around what's helping them to feel positive and well at work, and what can support them long term, I suppose, to make work more manageable for them, rather than it always there being reactive plans, the kind of proactive plans.
Thank you. Asiya, is there anything else that you would like to add to that at all?
Yes, I mean, I can quite understand what the management level kind of feel, because it's probably affecting the lack of ratio, and managers probably stressing about how is this person telling me last minute, and obviously on the other side it's a genuine case. I would say, refer back to your policies. If it's a fairly new member of staff, perhaps look at the probation period. I wouldn't advise anything else beyond that. I'm sure, Stella and Rachel have covered it quite well. But it is quite frustrating when that happens. But it's also about reaching out, and maybe the obvious signs are there that you know of about your staff member. Maybe it's hidden behind that, and it's about reaching out more deeper. And to be honest, sometimes in our setting, if we are seriously lack of staff and ratios being compromised, deputy will step in. If deputy can't step in, I myself as a manager will step in. And we always have our bank staff. So maybe you need to start looking at referring bank, having a wider range of bank staff available.
Thank you very much. I've got another question here, which I'm going to start off by answering and then pass it around to other people, because the question is there an example of an anonymous survey that we could issue to our staff? As someone has said, we're a small team and our staff may not feel like they can be open and honest. And I think this is a really, especially as so many early year settings are small. Now, the answer I can give is this is something that we're looking at the Anna Freud Centre, but we've developed one for schools, but it's much more difficult in early year settings. We'd like to test it. So if anyone's interested in testing, please get in touch with me. It's an evidence-based survey, but one of the issues is it won't work for settings with less than 10 people. So I don't know if anyone else can give, because if people want to be anonymous, I think that's the threshold, 10 people. So I don't know if anyone else has got any suggestions about how to do this in small settings, how to replace an anonymous setting with various practices that might make people feel comfortable speaking out.
There's various online tools such as SurveyMonkey, and you can actually input to that anonymously and gather the data in from that, so you can't see handwriting, etc. It makes them feel more confident that you can't tell who has responded to the survey and what they've said, and it's really helpful because it can be used on a mobile app, so you can send them the link by the mobile app device and they can input it in their own time, and probably get that back, and that will make it a little more, staff feel a bit more confident that it's anonymous, perhaps.
Google Forms can be good as well, because I think SurveyMonkey has some limitations on its free version. And if you wanted some inspiration for questions, I know Twinkle, I think, has an early years staff wellbeing questionnaire that you could maybe take some of the questions from.
Yeah, I was going to say Google Forms as well. We tend to use Google Forms, but not for anonymous surveys, but when we're sending out to parents. But I think that can be quite anonymous as well. And I'm sure a very small setting, the staff from a very small setting would appreciate that, because then it's highlighted who's saying what, and it brings down their self-esteem and their confidence. So I can understand Google Forms may be the way.
And within a small setting, I suppose it can be difficult to get those conversations going. And I guess that's where managers being open and honest and modelling that and sort of showing that it's safe to do might help others feel safer to do so too.
And there was a very good example of someone showing vulnerability, wasn't there? And vulnerability, I mean, it's a difficult step to take for a manager, because you feel sometimes you shouldn't be vulnerable, but we're all people, and the vulnerability can be part of creating a culture of openness. And obviously that's an individual choice for people to take, but it is part of creating an open dialogue on mental health and wellbeing. It's 6 o'clock now. I just want to thank all the speakers for what has been a really fascinating and wide-ranging series of presentation. I'm sorry that we weren't able to answer all the questions. There's some great questions here. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is a really important issue. We're very grateful for you being part of this effort, which so many of you share to improve and helps and support staff through wellbeing. And also to thank you, as others have said, for the extraordinary job that you've been doing, particularly over the last 15, 18 months when things have been very tough, and to keep your settings going throughout that period is really a remarkable achievement. So thank you very much. Do join us for our next webinar. Do join Early Years in Mind. We'll give you details for all our resources. Please log on here, and we're happy to share everything that we have got with you, and equally would really appreciate your sharing anything back. We will have an evaluation form, and we'd be grateful for that. So we constantly look at how these sessions go. But just to say thanks very much for joining, and thank you for all the speakers for the presentation.